I'm Elaine Reyes at the United Nations headquarters in New York, and this is UN Insider.
Coming up.
Climate action is not optional, it's an imperative.
Pushing for climate solutions amid rising global temperatures and deadly extreme weather events.
You cannot take the nature for granted. You have to work with the nature. You have to build that level of resilience.
The UN calls for drastic action as a growing number of places face an issue that threatens their very existence.
Climate change is really affecting a country. A whole nation could be gone in a matter of decades.
A look at where things stand in the battle against climate change. Next.
Climate change is one of the most urgent issues on the UN's agenda. On this edition of UN Insider, we'll take a look at the impacts of climate change and the push for a more sustainable future. 2024 saw the hottest summer on record and will go down as the hottest year ever recorded. The UN sounded urgent alarms on the need to take action and provide the funding needed to make a difference in the fight.
We are on a record-breaking warming path. It's expected to get even worse over the next 5 years.
2024 was a year of dire warnings and predictions about climate change. The World Meteorological Organization says there's now an 80% chance global temperatures will at least temporarily exceed the target outlined in the Paris Climate Agreement in the next 5 years. Rising temperatures mean we are likely to see even more extreme weather events around the globe, and the impact extends beyond natural disasters.
We risk trillions of dollars in economic losses, millions of lives upended, and destruction of fragile and precious ecosystems and the biodiversity that exists there.
Those risks signaled high stakes for the COP29 climate conference in Azerbaijan.
This is a COP to deliver justice in the face of climate catastrophe, to help move us closer to secure a decent world for all humanity.
After 2 weeks of wrangling, negotiators delivered an agreement that will help fund many of the efforts agreed to at the previous conference. Wealthier nations pledged to contribute at least $300 billion annually. The Secretary General calls the deal a base to build upon, but some developing nations say it just doesn't go far enough.
Developed countries' financial commitments still fall far short of meeting the needs of developing nations, and their financial obligations must be further clarified. China, as a responsible major developing country, will steadfastly promote the multilateral process and international cooperation on climate change together with all parties, regardless of how the global landscape evolves.
Small island nations contribute very little to carbon emissions, but they face the greatest risk from extreme weather and other climate impacts. Antigua and Barbuda hosted the UN's Small Island Developing States Conference. The result? A new 10-year action plan designed to provide targeted assistance to these vulnerable nations. Climate change doesn't just impact humans, it's also a threat to plant and animal species and ecosystems around the globe. The UN's Biodiversity Conference in Cali, Colombia, attempted to address those threats. While the conference was suspended without key funding agreements, progress was made. Among the achievements, the establishment of a permanent panel of indigenous peoples that will consult the UN on conservation decisions. We spoke with Colombia's Environment Minister, Susana Mohammed, about the steps her country is taking to protect its biodiversity.
We have a very strong plan against deforestation, and we are working with communities, especially indigenous, Afro-descendants, and campesinos, to generate an economical process of restoration of land that can create new products from biodiversity, and that's one of our key goals. We have also been able to tackle in the last 2 years deforestation by decreasing, compared to 2021, 51% of the rate of deforestation, but we're still far for actually being able to control this phenomenon.
Our changing climate has resulted in severe drought, a loss of workable land, and food insecurity. The UN's desertification conference met in Saudi Arabia to tackle some of these issues.
We can only achieve this if we move beyond the silos that hinder our collective action, and if we adopt a holistic approach that recognizes the constant interaction between desertification, biodiversity loss, and the acceleration of climate change.
Coming up,
Climate change threatens biodiversity in a big way, and we recognize that. We have been recognizing that for a long time.
UN Insider.
Small islands are on the front lines of the fight against climate change. The impacts are often magnified for these nations. Climate change is threatening their very existence. Greg Navarro has the details from the South Pacific nation of Tuvalu.
Scientists say the sea level around Tuvalu is rising faster than the global average, and it's claiming land on this atoll nation, where the highest point is just meters above sea level at an alarming rate.
We can witness that the sea level rising is occurring because, in the past we hardly see during high tides certain areas been inundated by seawater.
Today, about 40% of Tuvalu's main island is covered by water during high tides. At times, it can be seen bubbling up from under the ground. Increased storms are adding to that deficit in a country with just 26 square kilometers of land.
The new government that recently came into office has issued the 21 priorities, and the first two of the 21 priorities are directly related to climate change.
Tuvalu's government is in the midst of an adaptation program to help counter the impacts from climate change. That includes rebuilding about 7 hectares of land lost to coastal erosion along this stretch of Funafuti using rocks and sand from the lagoon. Olokoni Tanaka runs the University of South Pacific's Climate Hub. He says land reclamation should not be viewed as a solution.
It's fighting a war that I don't think that they're going to win.
Adapting to climate change here is expensive and requires the kind of money Tuvalu simply doesn't have.
For a smaller country like Tuvalu, not only we struggle financially or in our geographical setting to be able to withstand those changes from the impacts of climate change, but also our economy are very small and heavily dependent as well on our natural resources like tuna fisheries that are also being affected by climate change.
When you talk to people here, whether it's in their homes or out on the street, you get a sense that they believe this country is ultimately paying the price for a problem it didn't create. And scientists say there's some weight to that argument, especially when you consider that Tuvalu and other Pacific Island nations have contributed less than 0.03% to the total global emissions.
We try our best as allies, come in collaboration to take this up into, bring up to these big emitters to tell them, like, this is what we are facing from what you are enjoying as to gain your profits.
Tuvalu Transportation Minister Simon Coffey made this video for the United Nations Climate Summit in 2021.
There's people reacting now to that video that never knew anything about climate change. And people now finally realizing, oh, wow, climate change is really affecting a country. A whole nation could be gone in a matter of decades.
Coffey has been instrumental in efforts to create the world's first digital nation to help preserve Tuvalu's culture and its sovereignty when the country's physical presence no longer exists.
As a responsible government, you need to be prepared for all scenarios. And that's what this Digital Nation initiative represents.
And the idea is that, heaven forbid, if people are forced to leave Tuvalu, that wherever they are, they might continue to maintain an independent identity and an independent source of revenue through the exclusive economic zones.
Last year, Tuvalu signed an agreement with Australia that includes giving a certain number of Tuvalu residents facing displacement from climate change the ability to resettle in Australia.
I know that Tuvalu is going down, so I need to go and look for a better place.
But some people we spoke with say leaving their land and their culture is not an option.
Maybe it's for our children, for them to migrate, but not us. No, we don't want to migrate. I mean, this is where our heart is.
Tanaki says the people of Tuvalu and all across the Pacific have been coping with the increasing impacts from climate change for years.
Somehow you have to have that hope that one day you'll be able to find mitigation, find ways in order to fight this beast. I think it's just the human nature of trying to survive.
Even, he says, when the signs and the science suggest that time for finding ways to somehow save this country from disappearing is running out. Greg Navarro, CGTN, Tuvalu.
The Maldives is Asia's smallest nation and one with an uncertain future. Climate change and sea level rise could make 80% of the archipelago uninhabitable by 2050. I sat down with the Maldives ambassador to the UN, Ali Nasser Mohammed. Ambassador, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
You mentioned tourism. We know that tourism, fishing, such a big part of your country's economy. But let's talk about climate change in relation to that and biodiversity loss. What have you seen over the years in terms of how climate has shaped your biodiversity and how your country is trying to protect that?
The Maldives is such an, what is sometimes called the exotic tourist destination, is exotic because of its biodiversity. And climate change threatens biodiversity in a big way. And we recognize that. We have been recognizing that for a long time. The Maldives hosted the first ever small states conference on sea level rise in the Maldives way back in 1989. And in that conference, we called on the global community to help the Maldives and other small island developing states to protect their biodiversity, to take immediate measures to reduce carbon emissions and help countries to build resilience. Resilience is the common challenge that every country is facing. When a country is wealthier and economically more powerful, they're able to set aside large amount of money to build their resilience. When a country is economically weaker and their economy is smaller, like the Maldives, the amount of funds that we have to set aside on building resilience is far greater. And that's the reason why the Maldives has been advocating for building resilience, building adaptation, and enabling more on mitigation too.
Your president recently addressed the COP29 climate conference, and I just want to read you this quote. He said, "The environment and ocean are more than resources. They are our cultural identity. Their protection remains our sacred duty." Just want to get your thoughts on what he was really trying to convey to this audience.
Well, for Maldivians, as the president very rightly said, the ocean is part of our culture. The Maldives comprises 1,200 islands, and out of which 187 islands where people actually live. So the main, not just main, the only mode of transportation for a long time has been through small boats, from traveling from one island to the other island. So you can appreciate the emotional attachment that people have with the sea, with the ocean, and with the marine biodiversity is in many ways sacred to Maldivians.
Are you optimistic that the trillions that are needed to fund the climate fight will be found? I think your president also mentioned that it is the trillions, not the billions, as what is being promised.
What we were asking in COP29 is not really that much. But it is a significant amount of funding for countries that need them the most. We remain hopeful that the wealthier countries, whether they are in the developed world or in the developing world, in both sides, we have countries whose GDP is whose economic size is among the largest in the world. We remain hopeful that they would be able to find a solution in which they would be able to help countries and help themselves too in invest in resilience. Investment in resilience is, we believe, the most important step that needs to be taken.
The Indian Ocean tsunami was the first large-scale disaster in modern history your country has experienced. So if you can, talk to us about some of the lessons learned in the aftermath.
During the immediate recovery period, there was hardly any mention of the word resilience. But it was during the reconstruction phase, the Maldives, its bilateral partners and multilateral partners, especially the UN, started framing the issue, framing the solutions that we were implementing in the Maldives as resilience building. And that the Indian Ocean tsunami brought home that you cannot take the nature for granted, that you have to work with the nature, you have to build that level of resilience. So in the immediate aftermath of the tsunami, we started bringing radical changes in the way we thought, the way we shaped our, especially infrastructure projects, housing codes, housing designs. What we started, safe island development, that ensured that the construction of houses especially and other infrastructure are able to withstand human-induced disasters.
And do you feel confident that if something similar were to happen today, that you would be more prepared and that there is good enough coordination among other neighboring countries?
When the Indian Ocean tsunami hit Indian Ocean countries, no country in the region had early warning system. Now we are lucky that Indian Ocean has ocean-wide early warning mechanism set in place. And with the help of the new technology, we are able to disseminate information far more rapidly through mobile applications. And with the help of early warning, early information, we hope that we would be able to minimize the damage to infrastructure, minimize, hopefully prevent any loss of life, and also educate the public on how you can actually react to the event of a disaster happening in the scale such as the tsunami.
Ambassador Ali Nasir Mohammed, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Coming up.
Climate mitigation is one of the things that we attach highest importance to.
UN Insider.
It has been 20 years since the devastating Indian Ocean tsunami. It killed more than 227,000 people in 14 countries, and it remains the worst natural disaster ever for Thailand. But the Southeast Asian nation faces a rising threat of other natural disasters due to climate change. I sat down with Thailand's ambassador to the UN, Churchai Chaivavid. Ambassador, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
What have you noticed over the years about the changes in your country as the world has just marked the hottest year on record? And talk to us a little bit about some of the programs, what you're doing to build climate resilience.
I think Thailand is one of those countries who are most affected by climate change. And of course, climate mitigation is one of the things that we attach highest importance to. We are an active member of the UNFCCC, and Thailand has, I think this year we already submitted a national plan to make sure that we have enough framework for us to adapt to climate crisis. A couple of years ago, when Thailand hosted Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation (APEC), one of the main outcome documents focused mainly on what we introduce as the biocircular green economy. And this is part of our policy drive to make sure that we have an economy that is friendly to climate mitigation. We make sure that we recycle. We make sure that we go for green economy. We make sure that corporates have this responsible business practice, good governance. You need understanding and cooperation between government and local community, between state officials and people, youth, women, people of various ethnic backgrounds. Climate mitigation to me is a process, and you need to make sure that we and the rest of the world undertake this process in the same direction. It's a global phenomenon, and this is something that you need concerted efforts, from the whole international community across all spectrum.
It has been 20 years since that devastating Indian Ocean tsunami, where more than 225,000 people died in 14 different countries in that region. Can you share some of your memories of what happened?
Certainly. I was there with everybody else. I was put in charge of coordination for foreign assistance right after the tsunami hit the region. The only natural disasters that we knew back then was perhaps flooding. So tsunami was something that surprised us when it hit Thailand on December 26th, 2004. Eventually, we lost about 5,000 lives from this natural disaster. So over the years, we have learned from that disaster. So first of all, of course, make sure that people are educated. Disaster preparedness has been incorporated into school curriculum. Children know what disaster can do to affect your communities. We have set up a fund to make sure that we have enough finance when it comes to capacity building, to make sure that this fund goes to villages for their disaster preparedness program. So we have preparedness at the local level. We have necessary financing to make sure that people get enough equipment, technology to cope with any unexpected natural disaster. I think we have come a long way, learning a lot of lessons from 2004. 20 years on, we are in a better place. If you compare to that fateful day.
Ambassador Chavez, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
I'm Elaine Reyes at UN headquarters in New York. Thanks for being a UN Insider. I'm Elaine Reyes at the United Nations headquarters in New York, and this is a special edition of UN Insider.
UN Insider serves as an important window for the global audience to better understand multilateral diplomacy.
It's very important for the media to cover the United Nations, to seek to understand and tell the story in ways that the average person in the street can understand.
I think it's very important that the media should contribute to conveying important messages about the reality of today's challenges.
UN Insider has come to the UN, and we at the UN are so grateful to have it here. It is the only dedicated TV program to what is happening in the UN, and it is reaching so many people with, as it says in its title, inside the UN stories.
Media plays an important role in providing objective information across the world.
We think that media has a strong power of uplifting, what we are trying to convey as messages as developing countries.
We need the mobilization of all peoples, of whole government and whole of society, and media can help us to be informed so that we also can make our part.
I think the media is fundamental to enable citizens across the world, first of all, to understand what is the rationale of having the United Nations. It's not that there is one place on planet Earth that will tell the rest of the world what to do. It is a much more complex story.